The seventh generation of consoles had one of the most heated console wars of all time. It was a war between the Xbox 360 and the PS3, and the Xbox 360 is the one that started the war. Don't worry, it's still being charged for war crimes. The Xbox 360 was announced on May 12th of 2005. This announcement took place on both G4 and most interestingly, on MTV. To think the same place you could watch Girl Code is the same place you get the new Xbox console reveal says a lot about MTV. After this reveal, we'd have to wait 5.5 very long months until the Xbox 360's launch, which must have sucked. On May 22nd of 2005, the 360 launched. The launch titles for the Xbox 360 were as follows: AMP3, Call of Duty 2, FIFA 06, Need for Speed Most Wanted, Perfect Dark Zero Hour, Quake 4, and Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. This was a decent launch with stuff like Need for Speed, but it was nothing to write home about. I don't think people were that excited that FIFA 06 was launching day one, but I don't know, people are weird. Along with the launch of all these great games, you also had the launch of Xbox Live. Xbox Live was a service where you could sign up for a monthly fee, and this would allow you to play online in games. Xbox Live was originally on the OG Xbox, but because not a lot of people had internet back in the early 2000s, this wasn't really implemented very well, and there wasn't very many games that supported it. For Xbox Live to work, you'd have to find a computer, and you'd have to sign up on the computer. You'd have to have an Ethernet cable that will connect to your router, and then you'd be able to play online. This was a very clunky way of doing things, and therefore not a lot of people really took the time to figure all that shit out. So this wasn't really a very effective service when it first came out, but with the Xbox 360, it was definitely much better, probably due to the fact that you could access the internet much more easily. This would also allow for you to voice chat with people while you're playing games. So, this meant you can get screamed at by a 9-year-old all the way across the country. Shortly after the launch of Microsoft's next big thing, a little roadblock came up. Alright, shield your eyes. Wait, no, open them. This is the Xbox Red Ring of Death. You know it, you love it, and you can't live without it. Lots of Xbox 360 systems were affected by this. Some of them were at launch, and most of them were sometime after launch with those first models of the Xbox 360, most notably with the white models. Those seem to be notorious for those hardware failures. Now, it's not certain how many systems were affected by this, but it seemed to be quite a big deal because it was on the news. Now, over the rest of the fiscal year, we'd have games like Dead or Alive 4, Ridge Racer 6, Madden 06, Gun, Burnout Revenge, Battlefield 2, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, Fear, Doom 3, that all came out in the first year of the 360's life. Most of these games weren't bad, they weren't very good, they were just kind of forgettable. So for the rest of 2005, there was nothing that really drew anybody to the 360. But the next year would kind of pick up the slack, and there'll be quite a few decent games. In 2006, we'd have games like Call of Duty 3, Gears of War, Tom Clancy Ghost Recon, Dead Rising, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Just Cause, Sonic 06, Need for Speed Carbon, and that's it. Some of these games, like Marvel Ultimate Alliance and Need for Speed Carbon, were pretty forgotten, and games like Just Cause and Dead Rising spawned some good series that went good before they went average. And of course, we have Sonic 06. Who can forget? And we all know how that turned out. It's fantastic. Would definitely recommend. Now it's 2007. 2007 was probably the best year for the Xbox 360. There was a lot of third-party support, but the exclusives should definitely not be overshadowed. Games like Bioshock, Mass Effect, Assassin's Creed, Rock Band, Portal, Skate, Forza Motorsport 2, and Crackdown all came out this year. I feel like I'm missing something. Anyway, we had Skate, which was a skateboarding game that was pretty standard, but what I find most notable about this is that it wasn't tied to a celebrity, and the most popular skateboarding games at this time were the Tony Hawk games, and for this to just be a standalone new IP skating game with no strings attached, that was pretty cool. This was purely a skateboarding game with some good physics and a lot of its own style, while still maintaining that skater vibe. Oh, so that's why it's rated teen. Trying to appeal to those skaters. Yeah, because you know they don't fuck around with that unrated shit. Yeah, because if I don't hear mild cursing in my extreme sports game, is it even an extreme sports game? Portal was another great game released in 2007, and this was a great game because it utilized a lot of the Xbox's power at that time. It was a lot of jumping from point to point, and it was crazy to see the Xbox load and render all this environment somewhat simultaneously because you're jumping around so much, and this game doesn't even stutter. That's insane. And also, this game is super fun and addicting because of its puzzles and the way they're all laid out, and the characters are actually pretty memorable, which is surprising because it's just a puzzle game. Mass Effect was another game that came out, I guess. Oh look, another sci-fi shooter. Reminds me of something. Oh shit, Halo! So Halo 3 was kind of a big deal, especially for the Xbox 360. This was kind of the defining game of the whole console. A lot of people played Halo 3, so if you've never played Halo 3, I don't think you ever existed. Wait. Shit, I've never played Halo 3. Oh, I guess I don't exist. Halo 3 was a big thing because of this right here. Halo 3 multiplayer was a great addition to this game. It kind of defined the whole game. Not many people played the campaign for this game, but they sure as hell played the online. They played that a lot, apparently. Playing with people all around the world was kind of a new thing, so for this to be implemented into a popular franchise like Halo, that was a recipe for success. I kind of feel like Halo 3 was somewhat responsible for the giant boom in online gaming. Because of Xbox Live, this was able to happen. You were able to play Halo 3 online, and Halo 3 was massive. It was a giant thing when it came out. So for that to be a thing, it really propelled online gaming into the future. And without this, I feel like online gaming would be a lot slower to develop, and since Microsoft was able to take that leap with the 360 and have a game that was so mainstream, I think that really helped online gaming blossom into what it is today. 2008 was another great year for the Xbox 360, but ever since Halo 3 kind of lit everything on fire, Halo 3 kind of overshadowed everything that came after it, so 2008 was a good year for games, but it definitely was not as substantial as 2007 because Halo 3, and Halo 3 was kind of amazing. We still had games like Fable 2, Burnout Paradise, Fallout 3, Dead Space, Gears of War 2, Left 4 Dead, Far Cry 2, and GTA 4, but they weren't really as substantial as Halo 3. Some of these games were sequels to well-known franchises that started out on other platforms. Games like Burnout Paradise, Far Cry 2, and GTA 4 all had previous games on the OG Xbox and PS2. But then you have the weird one like Fallout 3, which was a sequel to a PC game that was made in the late 80s. Most of these games have become much more popular than their previous console counterparts, and that was due to the fact that people actually knew what an Xbox was. With this next generation, people actually knew what they were getting into when they bought an Xbox, and now that these console games were getting a new life, it made them sell so much more. And it's kind of weird because the sequels to well-established franchises were selling better than the original game. It was kind of nice because series like Fallout were finally getting recognition after being stranded on PC, and Fallout 3 sold very, very well. Far Cry started out as a series on the OG Xbox, and with Far Cry 2, it finally moved to a popular system, but it wouldn't yet gain a lot of recognition until later entries that I'll get to later. GTA 4 was another GTA, so of course that was going to sell well no matter what. Now, naturally after this, we'd have 2009. You know, how years work. 2009 was kind of the same as 2008. There was some new stuff and some stuff that was released that were a part of pre-established franchises. We had stuff like DJ Hero and Band Hero, thank God, Forza Motorsport 3, Halo ODST, Battlefield 1943, Halo Wars, Batman Arkham Asylum, Borderlands, Left 4 Dead 2, Assassin's Creed 2, Skate 2, Modern Warfare 2, and Resident Evil 5. So as you can tell, this year was jam-packed with sequels. Games like DJ Hero and Band Hero, I would say, was the start of the decline of rhythm games. These games tried to be the next Guitar Hero and Rock Band, but they failed miserably. They failed so miserably that I don't even want to look these games in the eyes. They didn't belong in the bottom of bargain bins. Like, get down there. You deserve it. R.I.P. to Guitar Hero and Rock Band. Those were the OGs. Battlefield 1943 was yet another World War II shooter. It's weird to think that these were oversaturating the market when now, in today's landscape, we can't escape modern shooters. We can't escape shooters that only focus on distant future or faraway futures. To have a game like this in today's world would be weird. But back then, they were having the opposite problem, it feels like. Halo Wars was quite a departure from normal Halo, with a heavy dose of... This had you controlling a team from a bird's eye view. You weren't really in the combat as you were just commanding the players to do things. This doesn't really have a lot of Halo's DNA in it, and for that reason, it's a really disappointing Halo game, and just on its own, without the Halo name, this is just kind of forgettable. Assassin's Creed 2, I would say, is where the Assassin's Creed franchise really starting. This game, upon release, received really good reviews, much better than the first one, and that wasn't really for the terms of gameplay, because the gameplay was kind of the same, but I feel like the controls and the gameplay itself was just a lot more refined, which is probably why this got such high reviews. Other than that, it's just Assassin's Creed. There's not really much changed. Left 4 Dead 2 was also another sequel that did better than their predecessor, but to be a nice neighbor! Online content as opposed to more single-player adventures, and that's fine, but it makes it feel like it's kind of worthless. Report on you! Just because the online wouldn't work today. So, if this was more story-driven first, and then online second, that would be better. And also, just as a little side tangent, Left 4 Dead 2's box art was really, really good, and the ESRB changed it, and I just really, really hate them for doing that. It's not that big of a deal that a few fingers were chewed off. Like, stop getting your panties in a twist. That box art was really, really cool, and then they had to change it, and that makes me so sad. Next, there was Batman Arkham Asylum. This is probably the second best superhero game, just below Spider-Man PS4, and the fact that Spider-Man PS4 was able to dethrone what this was inspired by is kind of insane, because Batman Arkham Asylum has a lot of Spider-Man PS4's DNA.
especially in the combat department. The combat in Batman Arkham Asylum is really fluid, and also the story for Batman Arkham Asylum is really good and really set the standard for what superhero games should be, not just stupid licensed games based on movies. These were actual games with actual stories to tell, and this has a lot of inspiration for Spider-Man PS4, and I just think it's funny that Spider-Man PS4 is just a lot more talked about now, and Batman Arkham Asylum just kind of got shoved into the abyss just because Spider-Man PS4 did it much better than Batman Arkham, when Batman Arkham is what started this whole style of superhero games. Next, we had Resident Evil 5, and after the sensation that was Resident Evil 4, this was seen as a definite downgrade. I mean, you couldn't even play with a chainsaw controller, so automatically this gets knocked down a peg. But in all seriousness, this really feels like after Resident Evil 4, they didn't really know what to do with the franchise, but they wanted to continue it anyway, just because it was profitable, and it really shows here, and that's kind of a bummer. The biggest game out of this whole year, though, was definitely Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. It sold a record-setting 25 million copies, so I guess you could say it was a big deal. Was another great year for the Xbox 360. There were some really great games this year, and there was also a few games that I feel like kind of went under the radar, and I'm going to talk about those first. These games included stuff like Super Meat Boy, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, Halo Reach, Alan Wake, and Mafia 2. I hear about these games occasionally, but no one seems to have much of a strong opinion on these games. No one's like, dude, you gotta play Super Meat Boy. Especially something like Halo Reach. A lot of people really seem to like that game, but I never hear anything about it. There were also some more well-known and classic games, like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, another one, Bioshock 2, Black Ops, Red Dead Redemption, and Skate 3. The biggest of these releases, I would say, is tied for me between Skate 3 and Red Dead Redemption, and mostly just because I don't want to seem like a shill for Rockstar and put Red Dead Redemption as number one. These are both great games. Red Dead Redemption 1 focuses more on spectacle and the feeling of just roaming around an open world, and Skate 3 focuses more on just wacky fun and great physics. And most likely, even though Red Dead Redemption 1 is up there with Skate 3 in my top spot, I would choose playing Skate 3 over Red Dead Redemption pretty much every time, because Red Dead Redemption 1 is great to play once, but multiple times it's just not the same, so it's kind of passable after that point, after you beat it the first time. With something like Skate 3, you can just endlessly play it. Other than just the games, there was also a very necessary redesign and a totally not gimmicky and totally justified accessory that also released this year. First, let's start with that redesign. We had the Xbox 360S, or Xbox 360 Slim. This was a much better version of the Xbox 360 because it had much more storage, with it being 250 gigabytes instead of the usual 20, and it was much less prone to hardware failure. Back when the 360 came out, 20 gigabytes just wouldn't cut it. Games were getting humongous in comparison to the storage capacity that was offered, so this was very much needed. There were models of the Xbox 360 that came with 4 gigabytes of onboard storage, and these weren't great pretty much for obvious reasons. That's not a lot of storage, and with games that were just going to keep getting bigger, this wasn't going to get you very far. But these were in select bundles that mostly came with this, Kinect Adventures, everyone's favorite bundle of joy. Speaking of the Kinect, let's talk about the Kinect, even though I don't want to, because it irritates me. Fuck you. The Kinect was the last of its kind in terms of motion-controlled devices. First we had the Wii, then the PlayStation Move, and now we had the Kinect. The Kinect was a little different from the Wii and the PlayStation Move in that it did not require a controller to read your movement. Instead, it used a webcam, I guess, to track your movement. It used IR sensors and cameras to track where your body is. And did it work very well? No. Was it a good idea? No. The Kinect wasn't really utilized in very many unique ways, and this is most prevalent in the game Kinect Adventures. Kinect Adventures is very obviously trying to be the next Wii Sports, and it's very, very bad at it. The games in Kinect Adventures were not replayable in the slightest. They weren't that fun to begin with, and they just didn't have the long-lasting longevity that something like Wii Sports had. Oh no, the Kinect didn't really have very much support, and it wasn't really supported for very long. There weren't very many games, and there wasn't much of a variety of games. There were a lot of rhythm games, like Dance Central and Just Dance, and there were a few one-off interactive experiences, but that was about it. There wasn't much other than that. A lot of Xbox 360 games after the Kinect was released supported the Kinect in some way or another, but it was obvious that it was just like a little footnote that they added just to get people to buy the Kinect. It wasn't really necessary. The Kinect was never really necessary. And also, the Kinect itself didn't really work very well. It didn't really track your movement very well, and that's because it was just made cheaply. You couldn't really add a whole bunch of premium technology into this without upping the cost by double or triple, so they cheaped out, and it really shows, because the main goal of the Xbox Kinect was to read your movement, and so you can play games, and it doesn't really do that very well. So, all in all, I think this thing is useless. 2011 is what I would call the year of the sequels. There's a lot of them, so we'll see if I can speedrun through these. We had Crisis 2, Mortal Kombat, Assassin's Creed Revelations, really another one. Gears of War 3, Modern Warfare 3, Battlefield 3, While the Sun Begins, and in number 3, L.A. Noire, Dead Space 2, oh there's a 2 in here now, Dark Souls, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, Batman Arkham City, and that's it. Mortal Kombat is an interesting one. So after 8 Mortal Kombat entries, they decided to, quote, reboot the franchise. It's funny, because right after this, they go back to the normal continuity. So they name this Mortal Kombat 9, and then go from there. Oh, L.A. Noire. Imagine Rockstar actually making games. This is a Mafia-style game that takes place in 1947, quite a departure from recent Rockstar activity. This isn't a huge open-world game, like something that they do later with GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption, but this is a more smaller-scale story with a smaller world, but a more straightforward story that isn't all over the place. Battlefield 3 was another game franchise that was on the rise, just because of the online aspect of the game and the fact that it was a first-person shooter. That was a match made in heaven back in this generation. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. This was the third installment in the Modern Warfare series of Call of Duty games. After the major success that was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, it was pretty much necessary that they make a third Modern Warfare game, because they'd kind of be stupid if they didn't. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was the best-selling game in the Call of Duty franchise at that time, and it was finally dethroned with this game, and it was dethroned by a very small margin. Not much changed from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 to Modern Warfare 3. I think the reason why it's selling so well is just because of the recognition of it being a Call of Duty game, and also it being on the 360, because on the 360 you can play the game online, and nothing is more fun than playing a first-person shooter with friends. Last week we had Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition, which celebrated the 10th anniversary of Halo, which came out in 2001 on the OG Xbox. This wasn't much different from the original Halo. It got a small resolution upgrade, but that was about it. So I wish they did a lot more with this, maybe added some more special features, maybe behind the scenes of people making the game, but I guess this works too. Oh, 2012,
the year that people thought the world would end. Such a simpler time. Yeah, that never happened, so we got a year of games because of it. We had games like Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Future Soldier, Assassin's Creed 3, Black Ops 2, Max Payne 3, Telltale's The Walking Dead, Forza Horizon, Need for Speed Most Wanted, This Is a Different Game, Halo 4, Far Cry 3, and Borderlands 2. Oh, cool, another Call of Duty. Cool. I thought I was rid of you. Next, we had Need for Speed Most Wanted, and this is a really good game with a great soundtrack, but it's really, really short. There are only 10 main bosses to beat, and I get through racing games pretty quickly, so this didn't really last me very long. Telltale's The Walking Dead is another great game. They really pioneered the whole choose your own adventure narrative. It has a great story, great characters. The only place that it really falters is in its graphical department, and even for the time, it doesn't really look very graphically impressive, and that's the only issue I have with this game. Next up, we had Halo 4. When Halo 4 came out, I feel like it didn't really have a reason to exist. It just kind of happened. 343 just kind of continued the story of Halo way past what it really needed to. Halo 3 was supposed to be finishing the fight. That was the literal tagline for Halo 3. But with Halo 4, they just kept the series going when it clearly was supposed to end with Halo 3. Because of this, Halo 4 feels just kind of pointless. It's kind of a pointless release. It didn't really have much to offer in terms of expanding the Halo story. It just kind of was there. And you can really tell that with this game. Okay, I feel like I'm going to get crucified if I slander Halo 4 anymore, so I'm just going to move on. Far Cry 3. We're going from a very low to a very high with this one. Far Cry 3 is what I would consider the peak of Far Cry games. That doesn't mean it's good. The main protagonist, Jason, is really, really generic, and the story is kind of all over the place. But the one saving grace of this entire game, and many people would agree, is Voss. Voss is a fantastic villain, and to have such a bland protagonist, it just makes Voss stand out so much more. Jason has as much character as a Saltine, but Voss is so over the top and almost cartoonishly evil that it is a joy to play this game just to watch what Voss will do. If I were to sell you on playing this game, I would say play it for Voss. Voss is played by Michael Mando, who brings such a great performance as Voss, and he brings such livelihood into a pretty bland game. So to have someone so lively in a game like this is really, really refreshing, because usually voice acting is not the forte of first-person shooters. Moving on to 2013, in the first half of 2013, we'd have exclusively Xbox 360 games, but as the year went on, we'd have the reveal of the new Xbox One, and so we'd have exclusive Xbox 360 games and cross-generation games that were from the Xbox One and then ported to the 360. So this was an interesting year to own a 360. In terms of games, let's start out with the games that came out exclusively for the Xbox 360. These games included Battlefield 4, Crysis 3, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Blacklist, and Bioshock Infinite. Tom Clancy, I can't. These games are all the same. Crysis 3 was the last Crysis game in the trilogy, and this was a completely different experience on the Xbox 360 now that they actually got it to run properly on the Xbox. And this was probably much of a performance improvement over the original Crysis.
Bioshock Infinite was the third and final Bioshock game, and this one is a little bit different. It doesn't really focus too much on Rapture itself, so much as it does just the story. And I guess that's fine, but I really liked these games when they focus on Rapture specifically and not so much just the story. And having this take place above the surface is kind of taking away what made Bioshock special. And then there was Battlefield. Dude, Battlefield just had a game. Give it a rest, will ya? In terms of cross-generation games, we had Assassin's Creed 4. I swear to God, if Ubisoft stops making these, the whole company's gonna implode. Rayman Origins, State of Decay, and Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider was a great surprise because it was actually good. There was a game in 2008, but it sucked ass, so I'd rather not talk about it. Tomb Raider had some great action set pieces, a decent story, and most importantly, tomb raiding. I will say that Tomb Raider is very reminiscent of something like Uncharted, but I may sound like a broken record even bringing that up. But what's different from Uncharted compared to this game is it's more focused on discovery and less on just spectacle, and I really appreciate the slower approach to a game like this. Sadly, most of the games after this are going to be cross-generation, so these are going to be inferior versions of their Xbox One counterpart. 2014 is really when the Xbox 360 should have been questioning its existence. 2014 had nothing but cross-generation games. We had Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, Far Cry 4, Dragon Age Inquisition, Metal Gear Solid 5, Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, Watch Dogs, Forza Horizon 2, Tales from the Borderlands, The Evil Within, and Alien Isolation. This was great for the 360 owner that didn't really want to upgrade at this time due to maybe just not wanting to have an Xbox One because there was nothing that appealed to them or that they didn't have enough money to upgrade. This was a great alternative. You could still play the latest and greatest games, but they wouldn't run the best and they would have a lot of hurdles that you'd have to overcome, but you could still play them, which was nice to have the option. If you owned both an Xbox 360 and an Xbox One, there was no reason for you to get the last gen version of these types of games unless you really, really wanted those 3 extra discs that came with Wolfenstein New Order, but there was no advantage to having the last gen version. 2015 and 2016 would also follow the trend of releasing Xbox One games also on 360, and this is where the Xbox 360 would leave off. It would fade out with a whimper, and there would be no real game that stuck with players. There were a lot of games that had much better alternatives on other platforms, which was a real bummer because it didn't really leave a lasting taste in the mouth. It just left you feeling empty because the last game that was of note was maybe Halo 4 or The Walking Dead or something like that. There was no game that really stuck with you at the very, very end. Overall, the Xbox 360 had a very full life. It had a slow start, but really started to pick up a few years into its life with stuff like Halo 3 and Left 4 Dead, but by the end of its life, it went back to being a system that didn't really have anything to offer you, and that's a bummer. But I feel like what it did do right should not be understated. It really did normalize the online experience of consoles at this time, and for consoles moving forward, it really was a console where you could connect with so many different people because of stuff like Xbox Live and easy access to online multiplayer. And that's what the Xbox 360's greatest strength was. It may have not been a powerhouse for exclusives, and it may not have had the greatest start and end, but this is where the 360 really shined. There were some great exclusives sprinkled in here and there. Stuff like Gears of War, Left 4 Dead, and Halo really made this stand out from the competition. And with the added bonus of online features being so easily accessible on this console, this made it a great option for the 6th generation of consoles if you were picking between a 360 and a PS3. There was a reason to get a 360, but it did take a while for Xbox to really justify the 360 as a viable option. Overall, the Xbox 360 was a perfectly fine console. It had glimmers of greatness sprinkled in here and there to keep people interested, and it did everything that it needed to do to stand up to the competition. And this would start the greatest console war of all time.